Her pants look like pants that you would see somebody who like tames kangaroos would wear.
Jill Valentine, kangaroo tamer. I can not blame her.
All right, it's time to end this bad boy. So, I ended the last video having exploded. My entire physical being absolutely blown apart, and quite possibly one of the worst way possibles. I got the nitro, I read the warning, and I immediately left the room and ignored that warning. Or I should say, better yet, forgot completely about that warning. So I ran out, turned a corner, immediately went Charlie's Angels full throttle on the joystick, and was met with a "You are dead" screen because I jostled the nitro compound too much and exploded. I don't know why I immediately forgot it. I literally read it and I'm like, like running will put you in danger, essentially. And the first thing I did was run. So I went back and replayed it. I didn't record the lead up from the dining room save that we have up until this point. So just figured I'd go ahead and get the nitro compound again and then start recording from that point on. So, I mean, right now we probably have 20 to 30 minutes left, if that. So I'm going to go put this in. We'll finish this bad boy, and we will put another Resident Evil game in the books. Oh, don't do it. Oh. See, I literally just... It's so tempting. And I'm pretty sure that, I mean, I know I selected alternate controls when I started this game. But I'm pretty sure that, like, running back in the original version, like, you had to press a button along with it to make it work. Like, you just don't run by putting more pressure on the joystick, thumbstick, whichever one you use. So you gotta be super cautious. Her pants look like pants that you would see somebody who, like, tames kangaroos would wear.
Jill Valentine, kangaroo tamer. I can not blame her.
Yep. Yep. Of course. feel like there's... Oh, yep, right there.
Okay.
The lab self-destruct mechanism, it's huge. There's no power to the main elevator. Start it up. I went through that so fast, I don't even know what that last word was. The main elevator is getting plenty of power. Hello. Ooh. Hey. All right. Okay. Keep doing that. I keep doing that. All right. Wait. Oh. By the way, if you don't know the lore behind the Chimera, look it up. It's pretty messed up, like how Umbrella created this. Honestly, look up the lore of like every creature. It appears to be the control panel for the elevator. Press the switch. No. The elevator is working.
Jill,
Barry,
you could have at least waited up for me, you know?
let's go.
For him to try to be all chummy, and yet, when you think about it, they haven't even had the conversation as to why he did what he did. You can't just come back. Jill, you could have... Come on, you could have waited up for me. I'm trying to kill her, man. I love how there's just a pack of shotgun shells there, like some laboratory assistant just dropped them. Well.
Wesker!
Thank you, Barry.
Well, what do you know?
Oh, don't blame Barry for everything. I hear that his better half and 2 lovely daughters will be in danger if he doesn't do everything I tell him to.
Wesker, you're pathetic.
Well, you shouldn't worry too much, dear. You'll be free of all this anyway.
Why eliminate stars?
Believe it or not, that's Umbrella's intention.
You're just a slave of Umbrella.
Smart girl. But I think you misunderstand me. The things you mention are nothing. I'll burn all of them along with this entire laboratory. Barry, go up on the ground and wait there.
Barry.
You gotta love Barry. He must really be afraid of Umbrella.
You and Umbrella took his family. You bastard. Oh!
Umbrella? Well, I used some carrots and sticks to cow him, but it had nothing to do with Umbrella. I just used Barry for my personal interests. Though both you and Barry seem to think I was following Umbrella's orders.
What? What are you planning?
I guess it's time for show and tell. It's magnificent.
For the sake of this thing.
You know, I hate goodbyes.
Ooh.
Barry!
Forgive me.
No, you're not to blame. It's Umbrella and Wesker.
Even if it meant my family, I couldn't bear turning my back on my friends again. Shit!
Oh wait, I got this other stronger hand.
Damn it!
Jill and Barry together. In hell.
You want a piece of me?
What? Premature.
What?
No, Barry! You viral cultured freak!
Ain't no crates over here to crash. A number of capsules, each containing an unspeakably ugly creature. Oops. A panel used to release the emergency electronic lock. Release the lock? Yes. The electronic lock has been released. I'ma go home. Cuddle with my dog. Machine used to compile experimental data. What a pathetic way to die. He's holding something. Observation notes. The discovery of the G-virus was in fact 21 years ago after the administration of the primogenitor virus. Okay? The prototype parasite, which we had delivered from a laboratory in France, was administered to the sample specimen. The sample specimen took in the parasite without showing any signs of adverse reaction. The lack of any reaction was an unsolved mystery, but now everything is clear to me now. Okay. The prototype parasite was incubating in the sample specimen's body for 21 years. Then, from that incubating state, the prototype suddenly mutated. Evolved may be a more appropriate word to describe it. This observation gave me more insight in my research. Through further modification and testing, I was able to derive a method to create the G that surpasses the performance of the T. This was the breakthrough that would change the future of the BOW's history. I can't wait to see the look on Alexia's annoying face when I finally announce my research, but unfortunately I'll have to wait a few more years to completely verify my findings. William Birkin. It's interesting that he would say 21 years ago. Like, how old was he during the events of Resident Evil and Resident Evil 2? Because I mean, I thought Wesker was like mid to late 30s, which I know that we're talking about William Birkin here, but assuming Birkin was the same age or around the same age, that would make Wesker a teenager. Like, why do you have like a 19-year-old, really like a 16, 17-year-old researching one of the most deadliest viruses known to man?
Barry! Barry!
Hey, look, he only got that backhand judo chop.
You're okay.
Because if he got that Sir Lancelot, oh, it would have been rat, man. It would have been a rat.
It's careless of me.
Got hit with that
Wesker.
Knight's Tale.
He's gone.
First, let's just get out of here.
How and where? How could you possibly slither away? Okay, sorry. The terminal looks like it's used to monitor the lives of the creatures inside the capsule. This is definitely one of the creepiest things you've ever seen. I'm over here just goose and goblins, man.
Self-destruct system has been activated. All personnel must evacuate immediately. Deactivating and releasing.
Wesker must have set it off. Let's hurry.
Self-destruct system has been activated. All personnel must evacuate immediately. Deactivating and releasing all logs. The self-destruct system has been activated. All personnel must evacuate immediately. Deactivating and releasing all logs. The self-destruct system has been activated. All personnel must evacuate immediately. Deactivating and releasing all logs. The self-destruct system has been activated. All personnel
Hello? Oh, really?
and releasing all logs.
Come on.
Self-destruct system has been activated. All personnel must evacuate immediately. Deactivating.
Levers for releasing the door locks. It looks usable. Bullet. Yes.
The self-destruct system has been activated. All personnel must evacuate immediately. Deactivating and releasing all logs. The self-destruct system has been activated.
Deactivating and releasing all logs except for the prison.
Deactivating
That was really
all logs.
well, I guess actually it did. But I wonder if it wouldn't have automatically released the
Jill.
other three
Chris,
levers.
you're okay.
Glad to see you are too. Anything on Wesker?
We'll talk later. First, let's get going.
The self-destruct system has been activated. All personnel must evacuate immediately. Deactivating and releasing all logs.
It's a surveillance camera. You can't tell if it's working.
Been activated.
Oh, it is. The bed is covered in filth.
Must evacuate immediately. Deactivating and releasing all logs.
A dried up commode.
The self-destruct system has been activated.
So do you all think that Chris has been in there like almost since
And releasing all
the moment they got into the mansion?
The self-destruct system has been activated.
It's also interesting that Wesker would motion to kill Jill himself rather than try to capture any test data from a bout with Tyrant.
Come on, let's go.
All personnel must evacuate immediately.
I like how they both do that.
And releasing all
funny.
logs. The self-destruct system has been activated. All personnel must evacuate immediately. Deactivating and releasing all logs. The self-destruct system has been activated. All personnel must evacuate immediately. Deactivating and releasing all logs. The self-destruct system has been activated. All personnel must evacuate immediately. Deactivating
Papa save.
all logs. The self-destruct system has been activated. All personnel must evacuate immediately. Deactivating and releasing all logs. The self-destruct system has been activated. All personnel must evacuate immediately. Deactivating and releasing all logs. The self-destruct system has been activated. All personnel must evacuate immediately. Deactivating and releasing all
I mean, it would be. You know what? Just in case.
personnel must evacuate immediately. Deactivating
Yeah, we
and
should,
releasing all logs.
we should be good.
The self-destruct
Gonna die!
has been
Come on,
activated.
come on, hurry!
All personnel must evacuate immediately. Deactivating and releasing all logs. The self-destruct system has been activated. All personnel must evacuate immediately. Deactivating and releasing all logs. The self-destruct system has been activated.
Okay.
All personnel must evacuate immediately.
This is Brad. I'm running out of fuel. If there's anyone alive, contact me now or just give me a sign. I repeat, this is your last chance.
The self-destruct system has been activated. All personnel must evacuate immediately. Deactivating and releasing all logs. The self-destruct system has been activated. All personnel must evacuate immediately.
Ah, oh, right past it.
And releasing all logs.
They take the fusion, yes.
The self-destruct system has been activated. All personnel must evacuate immediately. Deactivating and releasing all logs. 3 minutes to detonation.
Damn it! We're almost there! Jill, you just get in contact with Brad.
No!
We can make it. Jill, ladies first.
Chris!
Would you let me have my moments too?
All right. We'll rendezvous at the heliport.
Jill, get in contact with Brad. No. You know, it would be kind of cool is if again, if they ever did remake this game, this story, that if the game itself, if the story itself was sort of like a fight against time, like relative to Brad running out of gas in the helicopter. Will you take the signal rockets? Yes. And so it was just like, oh, you've got however many hours worth of him being able to circle around this space But then again, I guess that would be like if it was done as like a separate mode, yeah, because otherwise it would be a super short game.
Jill!
You made it.
About to hit him with the Get Swifty. Watch. Blip! That should have been death. Yeah, hit him with the Cornelius. Woo!
Jill, use it! Kill it, whatever it is!
Rebecca! Like, such a simple, to the point ending. They don't say a word to each other. Well, that was Resident Evil. That was the events that started it all. It would be nice to see, again, I know that a lot of people would disagree, but I think it would be nice to see a remake, if only even just for the simple purpose of having better writing. Because some of the lines are just so cheesy, so I just can't help but wonder, I just throw in... But Jill can have her Resident Evil 3 outfit? What? But yeah, it would be nice to see something with like better writing. Because some of those lines when they're delivered, it's just like, wow, somebody really wrote that. Smart girl. I think it'd be a funny stat to see. Like when this game originally came out, when the first game originally came out on PS1 in 1996, like what percentage of players got like the
Jim,
absolute
you did a fine
worst
job.
ending? 11 health items. That's so many. Feels like a lot. Now play with features from the prototype version. Real Survivor mode unlocked. Item boxes are no longer connected, meaning that items can only be taken from the box where they were stored. Also, weapon aiming is manual. Experience these prototype-only features unavailable in the original Resident Evil gameplay. Chosen costume. Well, folks, we did it. That's another Resident Evil in the books. I still need to go back and re-record much of the Resident Evil 9 gameplay, since I lost, virtually half of that footage. No, more than that. I would say about like 75%. Yeah, it's trash. Not the game. The game is amazing. Just trash that it happened. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on the story of the original Resident Evil. Let me know your thoughts. I do find, again, the conversation of whether or not these games should be remade, and if they are, like, what elements of the original do you keep? Because I know there are I consider myself like a diehard Resident Evil fan, but then there's like the Die Hard with a Vengeance, plus Live Free or Die Hard, and then whatever that last Die Hard movie with his son was called. They're like all of that put up in like a cocktail and shaken up and drank within seconds. They think essentially all that's they don't think that this should be remade. Or sorry, not that they don't think it should be remade. They probably think that as well, but that you should return to fixed camera angles. And while there is, for me, mainly just like nostalgia wrapped in that, of as a kid, you felt that fear because you didn't know what was around the corner. And that's how they built tension. Because you had to be careful. You could run around a corner and immediately there would be a zombie right in front of your face, and you would get a bite. You would get the good night bite, which I don't think is necessarily fair. I guess you could say like, well, just very cautiously around the corner, and okay, but sometimes enemies pop up in areas where they weren't previously, right? Like even if you think about, especially in the remake here, where zombies can break through doors. If you leave a zombie alive in an adjacent room, they can come through that door, and then they will just be in a new area now for you. Or certain zombies just pop up after you complete certain quests or missions within the story itself. And so it just seems, I don't know, it's interesting to me that there is this like very strong affinity for it. I can see it being a blend. I can see it being a blend of using, third person over the shoulder perspective that we've seen in a lot of the remakes, virtually all of the remakes at this point, and most third person games of this caliber, mixed with some moments where there is a fixed camera angle. Because again, like I mentioned during our playthrough, when you go into the residence and you walk into the recreation room and there's a spider right behind you, I think that is such a cool angle for going through that door. However, we do have to keep in mind that the animations of going from one room to the next is a byproduct of hardware limitations at the time. Like we couldn't do what we do now, where you're playing Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 4 remake specifically, and you just walk in and out of these people's houses without any load screen at all. I mean, you think about how long that part alone would have taken to get through if you had to run around and run away from the grunts during that scene. and there was a load screen for every single door you went through. Or like if you jump through a window, there's another load screen. And you climb up the ladder, there's a load screen. So, you know, it wouldn't be, I guess, as fluid because of that. You really couldn't do both unless you're just moving into a totally different area. But again, even the angles themselves, I believe, were a matter of, hardware limitation. That's why the backgrounds of these games look brilliant. You know, that the background of this game still stands up today because it's all pre-rendered. And it makes it easier when you have those like fixed camera angles or like the background isn't really interactable. And obviously that's why your pickups have different textures to them than the background itself, and why they stand out, unless, it's some of like the hidden items that you just kind of get lucky with because you decided to walk up to an armoire and press X, and it turned out like, oh, it's just a pistol ammo clip that you wouldn't have seen. But again, my point being that with all those things in mind, for me, it's a matter. It's this question of how would they have designed it if they had the technology to do exactly everything that they wanted. And you can say the same thing about like Silent Hill. Like if in a parallel universe we somehow went straight from the graphical fidelity of a Nintendo, of like the NES, and then literally in mid-90s leaped to the graphical like realism of a PS5 or something running on like a high-end PC, and there was nothing in between. You had no PS1, 2, 3, 4, Xbox One, Xbox 360, none of that. N64, Dreamcast, none of those things happened. It just went straight from that. And they had the technology to do stuff like this. Would they have gone that route, or would they have just done fixed camera angles? You know what I mean? So to me, it kind of feels like the remakes or the reimaginings are more exploratory in that sense of, what would it have been like if the modern, what seems like nearly maxed out technology today was applied to a game 30 years ago. And also I think it's just kind of cool to see, the graphics be refined and the story updated. My main issue with any remakes or reimaginings is when you take away content. That's where I get frustrated. For me, it's like, if anything, if you're going to do this, if you're going to commit to remaking these games, you should only be adding. You should not ever subtract. And though I do enjoy the Resident Evil 2 remake, it feels like, for the most part, that's what the remakes have done. I think that there might even be a little bit. They sort of redeem themselves with the Resident Evil 4 remake in that, I know there's a space where there's like a villain, there's a boss that you fight with Leon that doesn't actually happen in the main game, but then they like gave it to Ada in separate ways. But it's been a little while since I've played the remake, and even longer since I've played the original Resident Evil 4. So I don't know all of what's content is missing, but I do think there is some, even outside of the context of like giving a Leon boss over to, like the giant. I guess it was goofy even in the original, but that scene where the giant Ramon Salazar statue is chasing Leon, and it's like that quick time scene, and you're running like that, and you have to like dodge the pillars as they fall down. That wasn't in there. But anywho, my point still stands, in my soul at least. Do not take away content, only add. And like I was about to say before I went off on the tangent, while I do enjoy the Resident Evil 2 remake, they took away stuff. Like in my Resident Evil 9 playthrough, which is probably footage that I won't be putting up once we actually finish the actual release of that Let's Play, there were no spiders in Resident Evil 2 Remake. The sewers felt a little less daunting. And really just, I would say, like, the basement area of the RPD felt less imposing. Really, there was like lickers and dogs and some zombies, and there's of course the tyrant chase scene. But yeah, I mean, they definitely took away content in that game. And Leon and Claire's campaigns don't feel all that different. They don't feel as different as I would like them to be, as I think that they should be, especially given that this game came out, 21 years after the original Resident Evil 2. You should have only expanded upon things. I mean, which there was some elements that were expanded upon story-wise, but as far as like the gameplay and how everything unraveled, you should only be expanding what that experience is like, making their campaigns feel very distinct from one another. Like, I'm okay if Leon B treads over, but I think even in the original though, like the canon, at least I've heard is that the canon playthrough is like Claire A, Leon B. But even outside of that, like Claire, I'm okay if Leon B and Claire B overlap in areas. I think there should be some distinction just because there's certain characters that they interact with that the other doesn't. Like Claire doesn't interact with Ada, to my knowledge, and like canon wise, like in Resident Evil 2. In the events of Resident Evil 2, it just doesn't happen. But it should feel super distinct. That makes you actually feel like, oh, it makes sense as to why there's not more overlap with them. Because even in the original, there are several moments where they actually end up running into each other and where they are in communication with one another throughout the events of this game. And to me, that just makes more sense. You know what I mean? And let me know if you disagree with that or agree with that. Like, I would just love to hash it out. But to me, that makes more sense. Of, you know, if they make it there to the RPD and they can find walkie-talkies and they decide to separate to try to like improve their chances of finding an exit quicker, it makes sense for them to stay in contact. But in the remake, it's so odd to me, to be honest, that they meet up in the beginning randomly, and luckily they meet up in the beginning. They reunite very briefly within like the first 25-30 minutes, and then not until the very end do they happen to realize that they're both in the lab. And then it's just because they come up on the monitor and they're like, Claire, you made it down here too. Like, you guys should have known that you were going in the same direction. You guys, or like, even if you got split up and then eventually the walkie-talkies broke, like the fact that you did not speak to each other through the entirety of that game up until the self-destruct sequence was activated and you're both trying to escape the lab of all places. Come on, man. That just kind of feels lazy to me. And then you get into Resident Evil 3 and it's even lazier. It's even lazier. You know, it's one of those things that we talk about this on the podcast, and we've talked about it a couple times, like as developers or sometimes you know, production studios, as they're following up on games and movies, and they're coming up with the next storyline, it's almost like they misunderstood what makes that first installment or its predecessor so special. And oftentimes I feel like what you see is that they just lean more into that thing that doesn't actually improve the overall quality of that property or that story. Like, for instance, with Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4, the original version was obviously a steep departure from Resident Evil 3. Like, I think there would be like 6 years between the games, which I think is one of the longest. Well, yeah, I think that's like one of the longest breaks in between like the next numbered installment of Resident Evil. Because I'm pretty sure like Resident Evil 1's 96. 2 years later, you get Resident Evil 2. A year later, you get Resident Evil 3. I think Code Veronica comes out and I guess technically, yeah, Code Veronica is not a numbered installment, but it is one that I think of not as like the fourth installment, but as still a significant story or entry into the series. And so I think that one came out in like 2000, maybe 2001, but I think it's like the original on Dreamcast came out in 2000. And then from there, you would have had 2 years later would have been the Resident Evil remake. And then it would have been another 3 years until you got Resident Evil 5 at like the beginning. I'm sorry, Resident Evil 4 at the beginning of 2005. So about like 5 years. And then 4 years later, 2009, I believe, is Resident Evil 5. And yeah, I think 3 years later, 6. Maybe 5 years after that. So the tie between like 6 and 7. 4 years later, 8. 5 years later, 9. Anywho, before I went off on yet another tangent, yeah, it's almost as if like once Resident Evil 4 came out, and it's because it was such a departure from the gameplay that we were familiar with in like Resident Evil 3 and Code Veronica. No fixed camera angles, over the shoulder perspective, the laser dot sight. You can melee attack your enemies. Your enemies are smarter. They can plan. They can talk. They mutate. And I guess what you see in the remake, I suppose, of Resident Evil 1, it's a much more action oriented. The puzzles aren't as difficult, but it still has this sort of like special aura to it that feels Resident Evil. Well, like it's different, but it's somehow it manages to like not fully go AWOL like Resident Evil 5, which not to say Resident Evil 5 isn't in and of itself entertaining. It's just it's very different. It's not like the style of Resident Evil that I'm the biggest fan of, but it's almost just like they realized, oh man, Resident Evil 4 took off, kicked ass. Let's do more action. Let's just make this whole thing just bigger, and it becomes this sort of Fast and Furious-esque evolution that you see just gets exacerbated with Resident Evil 6, where it's just like bigger set pieces, bigger, giant, crazier enemies that are larger than life. Whereas previously you're fighting things like a tyrant, which is like a couple feet taller than you with a giant arm, but still, it's not the size of, I think it might be like almost like comparable to the size of like a Mr. X, who's also just like another version of a tyrant. But William Birkin eventually, at the end of Resident Evil 2 becomes this giant blob, but still like nothing akin to what we saw at, like, say for instance, in some of the boss fights in Resident Evil 6 or Resident Evil 5. Some of the monsters that you fight just gets to kind of be wild, and then especially with Resident Evil 5, they just totally did away with like puzzles. It's extremely linear, which I suppose they are all to a degree, but there's not much of that back. You move from one set piece to the next to the next to the next. Things don't really come like full circle as far as setting wise, like setting is concerned. Like you start the game in a village and then it ends, and it just kind of goes from one set piece to the next until you're like on a ship, and eventually like having a final battle in a volcano. Which what? It just gets bonkers, like bonkers. I also, at least because I don't remember, and maybe this happened in other versions of Resident Evil games that tread over the same lore that we were very familiar with. Like I've never played Umbrella Chronicles or like the Dark Side Chronicles. I think that's what it's called, like the light gun shooter version of this. So, you know, it's interesting. It's interesting. It's interesting how that evolves. I think and it's part of it's just like fascinating to me. Again, just because we see that like they come out with this next installment and sometimes they just think, oh well, we have to go bigger. We have to do more, like more. Which I think also, I mean, this is a totally different conversation, but it just speaks to our obsession with excess. Excess everything. I think sometimes it's okay to scale things back a little bit. There should be this kind of push-pull, not just how do we outdo ourselves with more special effects or more explosions, more action. Maybe you need to get cerebral the next time you go into it. Maybe you have to take a different angle to let people breathe. Like even if you think about it, like even within the confines of a horror movie, right? A horror movie builds tension, builds. It releases a little bit of it. It gives you a little bit of a reprieve, of a respite, and then they build that back up. And there's this ebb and flow to it. There's back and forth sort of playfulness, because it doesn't work if it's just this constant tension building and yet there's no release for an hour and 45 minutes. You know what I mean? And so even I think when you're flowing from one, even in the context of video games, like if you're flowing from one installment to the next, I guess this applies to movies too. But as you're flowing from one installment to the next, I just personally, and many of you may disagree, that's totally fine. I just don't think that you have to be like, well, they fought on the moon this one, they gotta go to the sun next time. It's like, okay. Because eventually, I feel like you'll cap out people's, like, creative exploration, for lack of a better term, like their ability to stick with you through that journey because of what we have the ability to conceive. So yeah, all that to say, I'm rambling. All that to say, I think that the wrong lesson is taken from the success of Resident Evil 4. And you saw it grow to the point where, obviously they felt like they had to come back to their grassroots, changing a little bit, obviously, just because it went from a third-person game to a first-person perspective from Resident Evil 6 to Resident Evil 7, and get back, really dig their heels into the horror aspect of it. And then Resident Evil 8 kind of does the same thing that I would say like Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil 6 did, where it does. Resident Evil 8 definitely had its moments. I would say it didn't go full action. It didn't go full Resident Evil 5 or full Resident Evil 6. But it did become more action, a little bit, I think, more action oriented, a little bit more wild with like the introduction of lichens and whatnot. Which is such as, I don't know, I didn't really care for that, like how you go from zombies to that. But though I'm okay with the molded, I don't know. Anyways, and then Resident Evil 9, you see it as, which I think is such an interesting thing, because you see it as this. They do both. They balance both. You know what I'm saying? Like between Grace, and I do think it's a great idea, because as you're going into the game, if you've seen our, if you've gone back to watch the beginning of the Resident Evil 9 Let's Play here on the channel, they encourage you to keep it first person perspective for Grace, and then third person perspective for Leon, which I think is very smart. It's a smart move. I don't know if the next go through, well, I mean, definitely the next go through, I will stick with that, because I have to like re-record and want to make sure things are a little bit more consistent. Though I will be going through it for the second time once you get to like the other, 70-75% of the game. But I do think that works. It's like this perfect blend of Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 4. Which is really cool to me. And so it also kind of gives me that feel of like when I was playing The Last of Us Part 2, because I thought that was so cool. Like I remember talking to Dame about it, because I think he had beaten the game before I had. And I hadn't gotten through all of Ellie's days in Seattle yet, but he had mentioned that he was like, yeah, this game is so much longer than I thought it was. Because once you get through Ellie, it was like, surprise, you have a whole nother campaign with Abby. And then once you go through 3 days with her, it's this back and forth. So it's like, which I think was brilliant. And I love being able to, like, I hate that certain things happen, obviously, but I love to be able to like get that opportunity to see things from both sides. Which was super cool. And also just to have a game so expansive that it would feel like two different games almost. And Resident Evil 9, I think, does a better job of making those two things feel distinct, not only because of the perspectives that you use, if you opted to do that, but that you have one player, one character who this is their first biological disaster event, and Leon, he's this seasoned veteran. He's been through this before, and it does a great job of making you feel more confident when you are controlling Leon versus when you're controlling Grace, and making you feel scared. And then once the game gets into a section where it actually more fully hands it off to Leon, it's almost like you're starting the game all over again, which I love. Like we wait so long for these games. You know what I mean? Like we wait so long, especially nowadays, where, I mean, it might be 5 to 6 years before you get the next installment. You know what I mean? And anything that you get in between is probably a remake of a story that you already know. It's still exciting, but, still a remake. Because if you think back to the 90s, it's 96, Resident Evil 1. 2 years later, Resident Evil 2. A year later, Resident Evil 3. A year later, Code Veronica. 2 years later, you get the HD remake. 3 years later, you get Resident Evil 4. Like, things were coming quicker, and obviously you see it start to slow down after Code Veronica, but it's just, now we wait so long for these games, it sucks when you start to play it and it's like 10 hours and done. I waited 5 to 6 years for 10 hours of gameplay of one of my favorite franchises of all time. Just kind sucks. So that they're able to do that, and I don't know if they were inspired at all by The Last of Us Part 2, but I think that it's a very cool way to go. And because also typically in these events, like, there's bound to be somebody else going through it. There's bound to be maybe a couple other survivors. So to be able to have these experiences that feel like the game is starting over fresh is pretty cool. But yeah, I've rambled on way longer than I should have. Way longer than I should have. But for those of you that have watched the entirety of the video, I really do appreciate it. And even for those who didn't get this far and will probably never hear this, I thank you for even just clicking on it or giving a little impression. It means a lot. So appreciate you all for sticking through for Resident Evil HD Remake. Again, another Resident Evil in the books. Moving on to the next one. Just more horror. And hopefully delve into some other games as well. Like I've said before, big fan of horror games. Easily one of my favorite genres. Brings me back to the old days of watching my older brother play these, where you're terrified, but you're so intrigued at the same time. You just can't take your eyes off. You know, you guys are hashing it out, you know, trying to figure out puzzles and throwing out ideas. It's just such a cool thing. It's such a cool thing to me. And I hope to continue to do that with you all. But with that, we'll go ahead and wrap this video up. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and we will catch you soon.